So when I saw that JJ Watt got signed by the Cardinals, I thought, oh wow, what a great move. He can really help them. Why didn't I think of that? That's actually a really good fit. What a lot of people thought when they saw it was I thought he wanted to go to a contender, which is a bit surprising to me. I'm surprised people are so low on Arizona after going 8-8, and I thought they were a pretty good team. So sort of seeing people, I feel like, be very dismissive of Arizona. I don't know if it's totally unfair. And so I figured let's talk about their offseason, what they have ahead of them. Because listen, they do have some flaws in this roster. There's no denying that. But I also think that there's ways they can improve. And I do think that they certainly are a team that has a shot with a good offseason to, be a playoff team or better. So yeah, first let's just talk about who they have that is going to be expiring this offseason. Well, as in these guys' contracts are expiring. They're not dying, at least hopefully not. So what you see to the right, that's how much money, millions of dollars, I suspect they'll probably get with a new contract. That's just a prediction. It's certainly not an exact science, and I could be wrong on some of it. But, that's what I'm thinking is going to happen. Larry Fitzgerald, I have a question mark. I honestly have no idea what's going on with him. But, there are a couple of key players. Kenyon Drake, J.R. Sweezy, who's a starting guard for them. Hassan Reddick, who I think is probably their biggest guy they're probably going to want to sign. The 10 or 15 is, I think that if they signed him to a deal, his cap hit for this year would probably end up being around 10 million. They could maybe even go lower if they wanted to with backloading the contract. I think he'll probably be looking at like 4 years, 50 million, something like that. Or you could franchise tag him for 15 million. So that's why there's two numbers there. Also, this isn't the entire list of free agents. These are just the most notable free agents, in my opinion. And also what you see on the top of the screen, their cap space, it's, again, negative 2 million-ish. The reason why it's not official is we still don't know exactly how much money JJ Watt is going to get this year and next year. So we're kind of waiting on the details to come out before we know exactly what their cap space is. So now here are the cut candidates, not necessarily who I think they should cut, just guys that they could cut potentially. That's how much money you would save if you cut them. Robert Alford, to me, he's 100% getting cut. He couldn't stay healthy once he signed a deal with Arizona, and they saved $7 million and only have about $1 million in dead cap. So that seems like a no-brainer to me. Devin Kennard is another one who, he was kind of overpaid at the time, and they would still actually have about $6-7 million of dead cap if they do cut him, but still a candidate, especially because next year he was expected more unless you cut him next year. You also have Justin Pugh, who, listen, he's a starting offensive lineman for them. They don't necessarily need to get rid of those guys, but you could save $7 million if you wanted to. And same thing with Mason Cole. He is technically a starting offensive lineman, not a very good one, but he's their starting center. You could save $2 million if you can find a replacement for him. And one last guy, Chandler Jones. Listen, you could save $15 million if you cut him. I don't know if you want to do that, but just that is a tool in the tool belt. Not what I would do, but maybe someone disagrees. So I'm just bringing that up. And you could also probably save around $5 million or so for a restructure. So if you want to restructure, because he's on the last year of his deal, you'd have to offer him a second year to make it work. But in doing that, you could, save yourself some money. So that's another thing that they could potentially do. So what does this mean? What are the many options that they can decide? Honestly, there's not that many different options. Also, I got a little lens flare thing going on here, so that's kind of fun. Didn't intentionally do that. But yeah, anyways, what I think that could happen, what I think that they will probably do, there's a few slight things they could do differently, but to me, this is just what makes the most sense for them to do. I think they re-sign Patrick Peterson, Hassan Reddick, and Kelvin Beachum. Now, Beachum isn't someone that a lot of people know. He wasn't very good for most of his career, but actually played surprisingly competent for Arizona. And I think they could probably get him on a cheap deal because I don't think too many other teams are going to want to take that risk. So if you give him like a 1 year, $3 million deal, or maybe maybe you have to give him a second year, he might take that, just an opportunity to start and continue to prove himself. And Peterson, again, someone who's kind of fallen off a little bit. He's not old, like he's 30 years old, so he's not like ancient by any means. And you could probably get him for less money, I would assume. Xavier Rhodes got signed for a 1 year, $3 million deal, and kind of similar situation. Also, I just realized I spelled Patrick Peterson's name wrong. This is why you proofread, kids. My bad on that one. But yeah, also Hassan Reddick. To me, I say just give him a deal. He was really good last year. I think when you don't try to make him an outside, when you let him rush the passer, he can be really good. Who would have thought? So I think you sign those three guys, and then you have to cut players. I think you cut Alford and Kennard. I think you can live with that. And I think that makes sense. You're saving 11 million. You can also save about 5 million with the Chandler Jones restructure, which means your net cap is pretty close to even at that point. And of course, there's plenty of small things you can do to not only get under the cap, but also find a way to, to sign your free agent. So lens flare back in full force. This is a very interesting thing. Never had this happen before. I think one of my blinds is open, which is what's creating this effect. That's fun. Anyways, yeah. So what I think that the Arizona Cardinals, I think this is what they should do. I think it makes sense to, get your pass rushers back. And the reason why I think that getting Reddick, getting JJ Watt, and getting Chandler Jones and why keeping all three on the same team is so valuable is one, JJ Watt can play on the inside. He plays on the inside a good amount. So you're kind of using that versatility to your advantage. So you can sort of rotate those three guys, but then fill up some other snaps and get all three of them on the field at the same time, which is going to be really difficult for opposing teams to stop. And if you can do that, you're great at something now. And that's kind of been my issue with Arizona is I felt like they weren't a complete team. They had some holes last year and they have some holes this year. And there's really two things you can do. You can try and fill up all your holes, but if you don't think you can do that, well, then try to be great at something. Because if you have a great pass rush, well, now it doesn't matter necessarily if you have a less than good secondary. I mean, look at Tampa Bay. Their secondary certainly had their issues, but they were able to shut down Patrick Mahomes by going cover two, playing coverage, and their pass rush was able to not allow Kansas City to really do much. And you could see maybe Arizona is thinking, hey, let's try something similar to that effect. And I think there's some real logic behind it. So that's what I think they should do. Now the question becomes, are they a contender? And I guess first we have to establish what is a contender. For me, a contender is a championship contender. And that means a team that I feel like realistically has a chance to win the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they won the Super Bowl. Might be a bit surprised, but not shocked. So I think Tampa Bay at the beginning of last season would have been a championship contender because they were pretty good. They had shown that, they could be great. We don't know, but they were kind of a question mark. But again, not shocked. Are the Cardinals a championship contender? Well, right here I have what they need and what they could use an upgrade for. They're going to just straight up need a guard and number 3 corner. So they just need that right away. I think they're going to have to find either a cheap replacement or you can use, go through the draft right here. I think maybe use your first round pick on a guard. That would make sense to me. That's what I logically think would make sense. They could also use a upgrade at center, as I alluded to earlier. I think they could use a 4th defensive lineman. Honestly, maybe you just go ahead and draft in the first round a defensive lineman you like and say, you know what, screw it. We're just going to, not give you any time to throw the ball. We don't care if our secondary is weak. An option you could take. I think they could use a wide receiver. And also in this scenario, I have had Drake walking, which means they could use a halfback. Again, maybe you can sign Drake to a smaller deal than I'm saying or something, but you could probably use another back if you let Kenyon Drake walk. And again, everything I say there, that's just my opinion on how I feel about the roster. You're more than welcome to disagree about certain things. But with all that being said, I'm going to sit here and say that I think that they are, as of right now, probably not a championship contender. That's not to say that they can't win it, but just a lot would have to go their way to win it. But there's a long off season ahead. If they have a really good draft and they can fill up a couple of those holes, well, that could be the difference. Again, to think about the team that just won a championship, Tampa Bay, they had some real issues, but they were able to get 2 starting players in the draft. A starting right tackle, which really fixed their offensive line issues, and a starting safety, which fixed a lot of their secondary issues. So maybe that's what you can hope for if you're Arizona. You get a starting defensive back and a starting offensive lineman in rounds 1 and 2, maybe a halfback in a later round if you let Drake walk. And that could put you into championship contender status, especially now that you have something that you're great at on defense, which they didn't have last season with the addition of JJ Watt. So again, everyone's like making fun of JJ Watt. Oh, I guess he doesn't want to win. The Cardinals are going to win some games here. And I think that it's just me. I don't know. But part of me feels like I wouldn't necessarily hate being on a mediocre team. I would hate being on an awful team. Like, I think if you're on a team that's 8-8, that's way better than being on a team that's 4-12, where you just don't even have a chance. So I think JJ Watt just being in the playoffs is going to be something that he wants. That's sort of a minimum requirement. Maybe that's what he meant. We really don't know. So whatever. I think it's fun. It's cool to see a legend go to a team that's kind of on the upswing. And Watt's not that old either. He could play for another 5 years. That's legitimately a possibility. So let's not act like they have to win this year or it's a bust. So yeah, I don't know. I'll say not a contender, but by the end of the off season, could end up being a contender. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.